The desert light was merciless, pouring over the firing range like molten gold, bleaching colors, sharpening edges, making even the smallest movement visible from 100 yards away. Heat shimmered above the sand, distorting the outlines of distant targets until they seemed to float. The air carried the scent of burnt powder, faint oil from weapon parts, and that peculiar dryness that coated the tongue. A half-dozen Navy SEALs stood in a loose semicircle at the benches, their rifles lined like extensions of their bodies, their eyes keen on the scoreboard. The sniper chief, tall, broad-shouldered, sunburned along the ridge of his nose, wore the confident grin of a man who knew he was untouchable in his domain. His last group had landed perfectly, dead center at 900 yards, and the scoreboard glowed the proof. He pulled off his cap, swiped a sleeve across his forehead, and glanced around with the casual authority of someone used to being both feared and admired. Then his eyes caught movement at the edge of the range. Someone pushing a mop bucket, the faint slosh of water catching in the heat. It was the janitor. She was small compared to the men, not frail but built in the compact, efficient way of someone who could carry heavy loads without strain. The gray coveralls she wore looked a size too big, sleeves rolled neatly to the elbow. Her blonde hair was bound tight, a few stubborn strands catching sunlight. She moved steadily, not rushed, not hesitant. The chief let out a low chuckle. "Only SEALs shoot that clean," he said, tossing the line toward no one in particular, though his eyes lingered on her. The others picked up the humor, grinning, some giving the kind of smirk reserved for outsiders who didn't belong here. The janitor, Clare, didn't look up. She wrung the mop head into the bucket, set it back to the floor, and kept working. From the outside, there was nothing remarkable about her. Just another civilian contractor, here for the paycheck, invisible in the military machinery. But she had a stillness about her, a presence that went unnoticed until you tried to place why you couldn't look away. The young private standing near the chief shifted uneasily. He had noticed the way she glanced toward the targets between each mop stroke, the subtle narrowing of her eyes, as if measuring something invisible. But he said nothing. Claire finished her section and rolled the bucket along, the wheels squeaking faintly on the concrete. She stopped briefly to take a sip from her water bottle, eyes still following the rhythm of shots downrange. Each time a rifle cracked, she seemed to mark its accuracy without ever looking at the scoreboard. In her mind, she wasn't at the base firing range. She was in the highlands of Nuristan again, the air thinner, colder, the wind carrying scents of pine and cordite. She could still hear the sharp report of her rifle echoing off rock faces, the quick calm's chatter in her ear, the steady breathing that wasn't just habit, it was survival. She had made her living in the quiet seconds before the shot, when the entire world narrowed to the space between her crosshairs. But here, no one knew that. To them, she was just the woman who cleaned up after their drills, and maybe that was better. The chief's voice cut back into her thoughts. "Bet she's never even held one of these," he said, gesturing to his rifle. The others chuckled. Civilians couldn't hit the paper at 900 yards, let alone keep a group like this. Claire bent to rinse the mop, her movements unhurried. She wasn't going to give him the reaction he was looking for. The range officer, an older man with a clipboard, watched the exchange from a distance. He had seen her before, not just cleaning, but observing. He'd noticed how she stopped to watch wind flags, how she tracked bullet impacts without the aid of scopes. Once, in an offhand conversation, he'd mentioned the name of a long-retired Army sniper, and she had looked up sharply before masking it again. Today, he saw something in her posture that made him tilt his head toward an empty bench. A silent invitation. She caught it instantly. Without a word. Claire set the mop handle against the wall and walked toward the bench. The chief watched her come, amusement flickering in his eyes. He stepped aside, leaning on his rifle as if this would be a brief, predictable show. "You know what you're looking at?" he asked as she approached, nodding toward the rifle. She picked it up, feeling the balance in her hands. The weight was familiar, not identical to her old M2010, but close enough that her grip tightened instinctively. She ran her fingers along the stock, the smooth polymer beneath her calloused fingertips. Targets at 900 yards swam in the heat. The flags along the line fluttered left, then paused, a faint wind curling back. "You ever even fired one?" he pressed. Claire lowered herself into position, adjusted the bipod, and brought the scope to her eye. She didn't answer him. Her breathing slowed. The world around her began to blur, the murmured conversation, the heat, even the chief's looming presence at her shoulder. All that remained was the sight picture, the minute adjustments in her scope, the subtle weight of the trigger beneath her finger. One shot, the target dropped clean. The murmurs died. She worked the bolt without looking up, chambered another round. The second shot split the first's impact perfectly. Third, fourth. Every one found the same center, the scoreboard glowing with the unbroken line of perfection. By the time she reached 1,000 yards, the chief had stopped smirking. His jaw worked, but no words came. Claire adjusted for wind without hesitation, landing her shots as if the distance were irrelevant. The scoreboard flashed. Perfect. Silence held for a long beat. Then she stood, laid the rifle gently on the bench, and picked up her mop. Passing the chief, she spoke for the first time, her voice low and steady. "Skill isn't rank. It's what you've done when it mattered." She didn't wait for a response. The crowd that had gathered didn't clap. They didn't need to. The respect in their eyes said more than applause ever could. The young private straightened as she passed, giving her the same silent salute she remembered from the field. Over the next days, whispers spread across the base. No one asked her for proof. No one needed to. They knew. And Claire went back to her work just as before. The mop in her hands was the same. The floor beneath her feet was the same. But something in the air had shifted, subtle, permanent. Some truths didn't need to be worn on a sleeve. Some victories didn't need celebration. Sometimes it was enough to know that when the moment came, you didn't miss.